Seattle homebuyers. The market is cooling off and you now have a bit more room for negotiation and leverage when purchasing a home. Today we're going to discuss what that means for you and some of the tips and tricks and negotiating methods that are worth considering if you are going to make a move in 2025 or 2026. Hello everyone, my name is Madysonarthur, a local real estate broker here in Seattle-Bellevue, helping buyers and sellers find the right fit throughout the region. Alright, so before jumping into what I recommend, let's talk a bit more about what's the difference between a seller's and a buyer's market. So in a seller's market, the demand for real estate outweighs the inventory on the market. And so you'll often see shorter closing timelines, less contingencies in place for buyers, and potentially multiple offer situations, driving the prices of properties up higher. Now compare that to a buyer's market. There might be more supply than there is demand, shifting the amount of buyers willing to jump onto a property, making things easier for buyers when it comes to negotiating longer closing timelines, seller concessions, price, all of the above. All right, so let's jump into the first thing as a buyer that you can do in a less competitive market. All right, number one is asking for a lower purchase price. Now, of course, this is going to be the most standard ask. You can do a bit more negotiation when it comes to how much you're going to pay for the property. Now, how is this done? Well, your broker is going to want to do a CMA, a competitive market analysis for you, to assess a lot of different things about the home. What are comparable properties selling for? How long has this home been on the market? What's the listing broker saying about the seller's interest in selling? And all of these things considered will help you come up with a general number to shoot for. You really have the flexibility to offer low and try to meet somewhere in the middle with the seller. Number two is seller concessions. Now this is in line with price, but a different strategy on how you can pay a bit less upfront. So you have a purchase price, let's say, of $400,000, but you don't want to pay for the closing costs associated with that. Could be around $15,000, for example, and this would cover government fees, lender fees, potential title and escrow costs, and all of this adds up to a pretty hefty sum, and you can actually ask the seller to cover those fees. So that way you don't have to foot the bill up front. All you have to do is really start paying your monthly mortgage, should you be getting a loan. Another thing that you can do when it comes to seller concessions is asking the seller to pay for something like a rate buydown. So you can work with your lender to come up with a specific number or dollar amount needed to cover the costs of reducing your interest rate for typically a designated period of time, and then in which case you can later refinance down the line. Now you can ask sellers to pay for this with seller concessions as well. Next on the list is longer closing timelines. Now, in more competitive markets, we tend to see sellers wanting a quicker close because this means less time on the market, less money draining out of their pockets. But again, it does depend on the seller specifically in terms of what they need. Oftentimes in Seattle and Bellevue, homes are vacant, but on a rare occasion you might see a property that still has an owner living in it. So this would, obviously change for that specific type of seller. But generally speaking, something that you can do is ask for a longer period of time between when you go into mutual acceptance and when you actually close on the home. Now, in standard markets, we typically see around 30 days as the average, with cash buyers being a little bit shorter, and sometimes if financing moves pretty quickly, a little bit shorter as well. Now, for you, a buyer in a less competitive situation, you can often negotiate that closing timeline to be a little bit longer, maybe 40 days, maybe a little bit longer than a month. And this is good for those that don't want to double dip in a rental payment or potentially another mortgage payment. Whatever it may be, you have more flexibility as to when you get to close and actually take possession of your home. Okay, next is contingencies, and we're going to break down each one individually. So starting with an inspection contingency. When doing an inspection, in hot markets, you may see buyers waiving inspections in total, just means not doing one at all and not requesting that the seller do one. You may see them opting to do a quick inspection before writing an offer, and in that case, they would then waive the inspection contingency within their offer. Now, in a less competitive market, you have the ability to really take your time, do an inspection, see what's right with the home, see what's wrong, and ask that the seller make any repairs or potentially get some money back on repairs that may be a hefty fee. So the way that this works is you include an inspection contingency in your offer. Here we tend to do 3 to 5 days. This is business days. And you have the time to really go get an inspector out, check and see how the home's condition is. And then what you do is you give the sellers a form 35R. And what this is a form that you can either continue with the transaction, revoke your offer, or you can ask for money and or repairs. So what we may see is a buyer finds that there's some issues with the roof or attic. In this form, they can ask that the sellers cover the costs or the services to go get their attic or roof fixed. This is something that we see oftentimes done in less competitive markets, and you absolutely have the option to do. Next, we've got financing contingencies. During multiple offer situations, buyers sometimes elect to not include a financing contingency if they're already pre-approved. Now, this is fine, but what may happen is you potentially spot a better deal, a better rate, or a different financing option that makes more sense to you, and it's much more risky to not have a financing contingency in place should you want to move your loan around. Now, with one in place, you have more flexibility to assess your finances and figure out the best path forward after you're in mutual acceptance on your home. And these tend to last about 20 days, so you have a good chunk of time to really solidify what your plan is, and it's really a nice thing to be able to include. Now, just a disclaimer with all of that being said, whenever you do write an offer, you're going to want to have a pre-approval letter from a lender ensuring that you can purchase the home up front regardless of if you are including a contingency or not. Now, in this same breath, when it comes to loan options, you also do have more room for negotiating on non-conventional loans. So in hotter markets, we tend to see conventional loans and cash buyers being the front runners. However, if you have a FHA or a VA loan, you are in a much better position in non-competitive situations. Two other contingencies worth mentioning that you can include in your offer that we may not see when we're up against lots of other buyers are title contingencies and then HOA resale review contingencies. Now, if you're given a resale certificate before writing an offer, in this case you may elect to waive your resale review, but oftentimes you'll keep it in there if you haven't yet received the documents yet. But these outline all of the HOA rules and regulations, the finances, everything to vet out typically a condo or potentially a townhome complex, anything that has a homeowners association. Now, as for a title contingency, this allows you additional time to verify that the history of ownership is solid for the property. When you are interested in a home, all listings offer a title report, so you tend to be able to review these before writing an offer, but it's always nice to include that extra protection if you can. Now, in conclusion, we're no longer seeing buyers throw the highest price out and hope they win. We are now able to slow down, vet out homes, and figure out if the home you're looking at is really the best investment for you. So I would say it's an excellent time to buy, and if you're considering a potential move, feel free to connect. All of my information is linked down below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.